And now I'm going to welcome Sarah Bolger from Colmar Brunton and Gemma Whiten from Eco Store and Jacqueline Smart from JWT. And so this is where we can first and foremost ask the three of you to share for you, looking at what you've seen presented and what you know. And Jacqueline, you've been involved in the sort of backstory and the development of this research exercise. For you and your areas of expertise, what comes through, what jumps out for you? And Sarah, maybe start with you.
Thank you. What I think really rings out for me is that the humanity that is within these within this playbook. And today we know that businesses are looking more and more at data that they have available, using technology, and that they're sort of tracking what people are doing using technology. But what we see here is actually quite removed from that. So there's a bit of a disconnect between what businesses are reading and what they are making decisions on, potentially, and excluding the human element and the consumer element. That's a sort of a watch out. And it's not to say that one is better than the other, but I think there's a real need to bring the two together. And so I think, that for me the key thing is to make sure that we're not leaving out the real consumer understanding or the people understanding when we're making decisions.
And given that there are a number of elements of a business and its functions where you could say, hey, get a bit more humanity into your thinking, reflect the human piece in your thinking. Where do you think it's most needed in that? Is it at the business strategy? Does it have to start at business strategy, or do you start with internal culture, or?
Well, I mean all facets of the business should be thinking about this, but if I know Grant's point was it's easier to start from scratch, if you know that this is the job to be done. But for me it's really critical that the people who are making the decisions within the business have a very strong understanding of the people that they're impacting. Right. And what we're seeing here is that there's a growing need for people to understand consumers to understand the impact that they're having on the environment, and the products and services that they're buying are a conduit to that. Right. So if we don't really understand where their heads are and the business implications, then we've got it's a difficult job to do.
There's a significant opportunity in that, I think, and it's kind of to your point as well, is that consumers are far more demanding of businesses and of brands these days. They are looking for brands and businesses that have real substance, that are really there to do good, that are about delivering a purpose and about doing something so much more. So I think the reality is that consumers are demanding it, and that is consumers of large existing businesses already or new businesses as well. And our opportunity is to be those brands or to be those businesses. If we can actually deliver as a brand real substance, then we can create a greater connection with consumers. They are looking for brands with substance, with more meaning, with more purpose. And then at the same time, they are looking for brands that are more sustainable or that are meeting those needs. If you can bring those two things together, then I think you actually have an opportunity for a really powerful connection with your consumers and with your brands, and that's a massive opportunity for us. So I think it's so important to be that brand of substance because consumers are demanding it of us.
Jax.
Okay, there's a lot that stood out for me in this because its framework is anthropological in nature, but it is too also psychological and sociological. So you're talking to the individual, you're talking to the group, and you're talking to culture, and you need to understand that there is key threads that are framed in this. So you'll need to spend time with it as an organisation. But what stood out for me is that sustainability has always been attached to this thing that attaches us to New Zealand. And it's been wrongfully framed in with an assumption that it can collectivise us. So a couple of things stood out. 39% of people are highly individualised, and acknowledging that New Zealand society is highly individualised and enclaved is a really important thing for us to get our heads around. The other thing that's really important to understand is that with the ramping up of capitalism comes the fact that you can see the ramping up of what makes us now common, framed in socioeconomic terms. So I've heard you use consumption, but really that's a socioeconomic aspect, which now what we have in common with our in terms of values is the anxiety derived from the management of money, really actually debt, and that our lives and the realities of our lives and how we're managing that and how that is or isn't connected to anything that's remotely sustainable, and how you can address those tensions is really important. So all the tensions you've talked about that we've framed is what we're saying and what we're doing, what we're wanting and what we've been able to buy or what we're consuming, and brands that acknowledge the ability to help resolve anxieties around being able to, which is really what the good life is the management of anxieties, the moments that actually allow us to have moments of happiness, and how in some regards those are in conflict with our ability to be able to attach those back to businesses, and the businesses can find ways to frame that so that you're bringing sustainability closer to us, and that sustainability in a good life becomes about the reduction of anxiety, and not that it's been used as some sort of finger-pointing neoliberal kind of the individual can stop climate change. And too often we've been bashed over the head, or we've been told as a nation, we are this, we are that, where, you know, Alison, you're right, stop making assumptions about the fact that we are collectivising naturally around this. Get highly granular with the way that you understand your customers. If you see in that algorithm a pattern that is incongruous with the pattern of consumption or with these moments, stop, pause in your data mining, put a human overlay into that, the humanity, and then find out how you address that discrepancy, and that is how you will actually manage anxieties, and that's how you'll push sustainability into the everyday realities of people's lives, which was the fantastic quote that I think was in the very beginning of this piece from the Toyota leadership. So yeah, that's my rant.
So, and a beautiful rant it was too. So the challenge to all of you then, I'm putting this, is for the people sitting in this room who are first exposed to this research for your businesses, what does that mean for how you go back? What you go back from this, and what do you say to other people in your business? Saw this amazing presentation this morning. We have to change the way we're doing our business. Right. So I guess the challenge is that that this is quite a seminal piece of work, and I guess getting that kind of. What do we do with it? What do we do with it? What do we do with it? How do people in this room use the opportunity to help business, and how does SBC actually influence the way that businesses are thinking and how they are manifesting what's in this gold mine?
I'm probably come at it from a brand perspective, being from a marketer. For me, it's about relevance. So, you know, so EcoStore, for example, I mean, intrinsically, our brand story and our sustainability story are one, and they have been one since we've been around. And there is a consistency, a beautiful consistency to the brand that we have to look after and we have to protect. And we have an overwhelming responsibility to continue to do that. So there is a consistency there. But the one thing that does change, and changes all the time and will consistently change, is our consumers. And so I think what we're seeing here is a really fast change in consumer perceptions. You know, we saw that in the Better Futures report, where there was a 12% change in those people saying they were highly committed to leading a sustainable life. So there's been this incredibly fast shift in consumer perceptions, what consumers are wanting, and we need to be able to understand that. We need to be able to keep up with that. At the same time, you've got a hugely diverse group. If you're saying 42% of consumers, you know, are wanting to live a highly sustainable life, that's a big group of consumers. That's a large number of people. We need to understand what makes these people tick. So we need to understand what makes them happy. We need to understand how they live their life, what is truly, really important to them. And if we better understand that, then we can reflect that in our brand, we can reflect that in our communications. And in doing so, you can bring a consistent brand, but to consumers in a way that is truly relevant to them right now. And I think that, for me, is super important.
And I would be thinking about what it is that you're able to providing access to through your business, your product, your services, your experience, or all of those things. And I think if we start to think about sustainability as being tied at the hip with socioeconomic understanding of what we now have in common and how we now think. And if you can start to look at how you're freeing up capacity around that, how you're not putting a premium, for example, on the more sustainable aspects of products in your business, but how in fact actually you are democratising those and providing greater access to those. If you can start to look at your pricing models, if you can start to look at your profit lines in your business, and if you can start to actually hold yourselves accountable, it's easy for me to sit here because I'm on a seat with a mic and no business. So I know I'm being incredibly idealistic here, but that's the point in this room, right? There's an ability for us to sometimes just take our own assumptions away, look at the change insight that we can do in any business, and have much more joined up conversations with each other inside our own organisations to start to go, where have we made assumptions? Where are we continuing to just do things as we normally might do them? How is that helping with the management of the day-to-day realities and increasing greater access to moments that matter and to a good life for people? And how are we being champions of that? Or how, in fact, are we hindering that and acting in opposition to that? Not all things will be able to be changed, but what's the light bulb moment for us where we flip the switch on that and we start to change it? And what are we making more accessible as a consequence of that?
Sarah?
Well, I think you
can be the good cop.
No, I agree with what you're saying. And I think the big shift, we've seen a huge shift in business in actually pushing a sustainable conversation into the boardroom. And we do have people who are assigned that responsibility, but I don't think we should be looking at just one person being accountable for it. I think accountability is everything. Everyone should be understanding the impact that the decisions that they're making in their roles has on sort of the planet and everything around them and the consumers that are a part of that. And so if everyone has some sort of remit to think about sustainability that in the business, then that is going to make a difference as well.
I'm going to invite one question from the crowd. We have time for that. Here we go. Nikki.
Thank you. This is really, really interesting. My mind's still getting blown by this individualisation. Who knew? Can we go deeper into that? Because I'm just thinking about personalisation.
The reason I was talking about that, and it's fantastic to see it in the big data, because when anthropology's really thick data, and it's a lot of work that all advertising agencies, True, etc. We all apply an anthropological lens to it. Is that we are highly individualised and we live behind closed doors. It's a misnomer or a misperception that these days we are that social. And that was so gratifying to see 39% are actually low energy and individual moments. And that's something that's why I was sort of saying that from a sustainability thing, we think that that's a great way to talk to all New Zealanders, to talk to the collective, to build everybody up, which is classic marketing, because that's where you get spend efficiencies, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
It's classic agency, we need a single-minded proposition that as many people as possible will get behind. But what we're hearing here is you're going to have to be very nuanced, very non-assumptive, very granular, highly individualised in the way that you can make that personal. And that's why experiences is coming out is so important, because it's the personalisation of sustainability rather than the direct. I'm a big spectator in a really big world where sustainability and climate change is part of that. I need to be a director in my own world. So there's not a lot of experiences that allow us to be personally gamifying, for example, our own ability to change our footprint or do something different or measure my own way of tracking through that. There's one opportunity.
And my own simple kind of rationale for the individualisation of the world we live in is that there's so much that's so big that feels out of our individual control that we have closed in on those things that we can control. And what we can control for ourselves is how we express the good life for us. And you know, Grant's saying you've turned off social media. You know, it's that kind of, it's all too hard. The more we expose ourselves to all of that, it's too hard and complicated and messy, and we feel pressure, that concept of the pressure to fit in, that actually we're just quietly closing the doors, and it's really interesting to see. And the challenge for businesses, particularly those who are, you know, marketing to consumers, is you cannot find the magic one size fits all. And as Jack said, that's expensive for a start. But it also risks that if you try to do that, you alienate, and that's the point that Alison made really well at the start, that what this research shows is there is huge risk in alienating consumers and the community and the people whose regard you want for your brand. And on that note, I would like to thank the panel very much, and can you join me in thanking them?